like to share from this verse here, because I think this is what Christianity is all about. This is from Matthew 28, where Matthew writes, Jesus came up and spoke to them, saying, all authority has been given to me in heaven and on earth. Go therefore and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit, teaching them to observe all that I commanded you, and lo, I am with you even to the end of the age. Now, that is the command of Jesus, and now here we find ourselves in 21st century America in what's called a post-truth culture, or a post-truth world. And what we're supposed to do is navigate in this, right? So this is my key theme for this afternoon or this morning, is that every Christian should learn to navigate a post-truth culture because of the immense challenges that we face, or that it presents to us as the church, as Christians. Do you agree with that? We have to learn how to navigate in this culture. So what we want to do is understand the concepts of what all of these things mean. So first, what is a post-truth culture? That's one of the things we'll deal with. We'll deal with three things, very simple. Try to stay simple. What is a post-truth culture? How did we get here? I think that's an important thing, because we hopefully would like to learn that we don't go back, right? But we want to see how we got here, and that'll be the philosophical part of this, okay? Because I was never a student of philosophy until I started studying apologetics, and really saw very little need for it. But if you think that we don't need philosophy, I think I'll persuade you otherwise. And then finally, of course, we'll look at how do we navigate. How do we navigate in it? How do we get through? How do we still be the church and make disciples in this post-truth culture? How do we do those things? So our first question is just that simple. It is, what is a post-truth culture? Do you know that post-truth was the 2016 Oxford English Dictionary Word of the Year? Yeah. In 2016, post-truth was the Oxford Dictionary Word of the Year. Every year, the Oxford English Dictionary comes up with another word. In 2006, the word was truthiness. Yeah. I think that's pretty interesting. 10 years later, they came up with this idea of post-truth as a term. And here's the definition of it. This is the Oxford English Dictionary definition of it. It is an adjective defined as relating to or denoting circumstances in which objective facts are less influential in shaping public opinion than appeals to emotion and personal belief. Wow. Yeah. So we're living in a world where reality or objective facts are less influential than appeals to emotion and personal belief. And this video I'm going to show you is just an example, just one example, and it's extreme. I'll give you that. It's an extreme. It's by this group that is a pro-family group.
In light of all the conversation about gender and identity, we began to wonder if there's even a difference between men and women anymore. We went to Seattle University to find out.
Aware of the conversation going on in Washington State right now around kind of gender identity, gender expression issues, and the ability to access facilities on those grounds?
Yeah.
Yeah, there's gender neutral bathrooms in all the dorms and stuff like that.
I think that gender is fluid, so if you want to use a bathroom because that's a place and that's a space where you feel comfortable and safe in doing so, then I think that that's completely fine.
I think that if whoever you think you are, if you're male or female, then that's the bathroom you should go into.
I think if it doesn't really negatively affect anybody, then I think anyone should be able to choose what gender they choose to identify as.
People, no matter what their gender identification is, they should be allowed to use whatever restrooms they feel like they identify with.
Is there a difference in your mind between men and women?
No, yes. I mean,
Possibly.
In general, yes. But I don't know why I think that.
Socially, currently, yes, there is. There is no need for that difference to exist, scientifically and logically.
If you think that you're a male, or if you think that you're a female, that matters more than the biological difference.
There's not much difference besides what society forces onto people.
And how do you know the difference between men and women?
By what people think they are. So you can't like judge someone just on like their looks.
I don't think there's any one way to really distinguish between a man or a woman, and I don't think it's necessary.
It's not always consistent. It has a high probability, like 98% of the time I can get it right. There is some ambiguity.
I think, yeah, there are ways to tell, but then again, you can always be wrong.
What would you say I am?
Just judging off of your looks, I would say that you're a male.
I would probably assume a man, but then you never know.
A male.
Why would you say that?
Based on how I look at you.
Do you think that's a problem?
Yeah, probably.
Do you think the difference between men and women matters for any reason?
No, not really.
I think most sociologists agree that the concept of gender is more of a societal construct.
I do think it matters somewhat, yeah.
To me, no. I don't feel as if it matters to me because at the end of the day, the person is just a person.
No, I don't think it should matter.
And the differences on a social level are simply a product of a biased society.
Then is there a reason to have those labels, male or female?
I don't think so. I think that it's, again, a social construct of this binary that we're given at birth. There is kind of a difference, but at the same time, if someone wants to identify as one or both or as nothing, I also find that completely okay. And
There may be nothing more self-evident in the natural universe than the fact that every animal species is divided into two halves, male and female. Yet the most intelligent of those species seems to be wrestling with whether male or female are actually real things. Have we discovered something new, or have we become too clever for our own good?
Sometimes when I call a lady sir by accident, they get very offended.
Yeah, they do some great interviews like that on college campuses. That one happens to be Washington University, I believe it was. But it gives you, it shows you what that generation in a liberal arts college basically thinks. Now we have them certainly in the Northeast. This is very much a part of the way people think. When I say people, I mean especially college students. And we have to be realized. See, when I look at that, I want to disciple those people. I want to reach them with the gospel. I want to get into the conversation and realize that's not the enemy. Those are the people that Jesus died for. And those are the people we want to find a way to reach and realize that most of those people will probably never come to our church or even a Bible study. And we wouldn't know what to do with them if they showed up. We wouldn't know how to embrace them and bring them into our community and let them feel at home. And that, to me, as someone who's, my wife tells me this all the time, that I'm a pastor at heart. My self-confession is that's what I see. And so when I look at those people, I don't want to think they have no place among us. It's how do we make a place for them? And how do we understand them? And I think that where I would differ with my wife, I think of myself more of a teacher than I am a pastor. And so I look at all the different things. I look at how, this is what we're dealing with. How do we get here? That's one of the questions, and we get to that. But where we look at this and we see this is one of the results of a post-truth culture. Okay, here's another another result of a post-truth culture. These are all headlines from either school shootings or the shooting that took place just over a year ago in Las Vegas. Where does any person, male or female, though most of these, if not all of these, are young males, where do they get the notion that they can just get a gun, go into a school, and start killing people? And whether we think it's mental health, which is usually what the news media portrays it as, or demonic activity, certainly a deranged person, angry, whatever it is, if I were to tell you this, that we have actually taught them they could do this. We've actually done it in our public arenas, like our public schools. We've told them that these things are up to you to do if you understand, when you understand what a post-truth culture is and how we are teaching the obliteration or the negation of absolute truth and leaving it up to individuals. And I'll get involved. When I wanted to find headlines, this is what my Google page looked like. When I put in just simply school shooting headlines. I didn't even scroll down. This is what came up on my first hit, where I just sat there and literally felt sick in my stomach and thinking, like, this is all within, last 10, 15 years, where these things, now some of them are repetitive, but it's just horrible what's gone on there. So how'd we get here? Here's the philosophical part. Okay, so put on your philosophy hat. I'll try to make it as easy as possible because I don't get it a lot of times too, and I have to reread it several times to get it. What I'm going to do is show you something that has to do with what we call a fact-value dichotomy. And that's, if you understand what that is, that's great. You're already ahead. Hopefully I'll tell you what it is, and I'll show you what's happened with it, okay? And we're going to start with the fact part of it before we get to the value part of it. Nancy Pearcey wrote this. She said, "The direction in intellectual history since the Enlightenment has been to grant to science the authority to pronounce what is real, true, objective, and rational, while relegating ethics and religion to the realm of subjective opinion and non-rational experience. Once this definition of knowledge is conceded, then any position that appears to be backed by science will ultimately triumph in the public square over any position that appears based on ethics or religion." So here's what she's done. She has separated now fact from values. And she's saying that this, I'm trying hard not to get you confused with this, okay? I'll walk you through hopefully I'll walk you through it. She's saying that from the Enlightenment on, people have relegated facts to the realm of science and mathematics. Empirical evidence is what it's called, okay? So that if we can prove it, then it's true. If we can't prove it, then it's not true. Okay, this man here is David Hume, and he is, I believe he is, as far as I could tell, he's responsible for this fact-value dichotomy. I'm not sure if he invented the term, but certainly he promulgated it. He perpetuated it. He kind of made sure everybody understood it. And here's my little side note here, a little commentary. It's because of this, that's why we're living in what we're living in. And again, hopefully, we'll look and see how this all works out. David Hume said this. He said, "If we take in our hand any volume of divinity or school metaphysics, for instance, let us ask, does it contain any abstract reasoning concerning quantity or number? No. Does it contain any experimental reasoning concerning matter of fact or existence? No. Commit it then to the flames. In other words, burn it, for it can contain nothing but sophistry and illusion. Okay, so here's the dichotomy is spreading. Okay, it's separating more. Okay, goes further. In the 20th century, a group of scientists turned philosophers. They were known as logical positivists. I mentioned this is going to be the philosophy part of it. And they took this idea of fact-value dichotomy even further. Have you ever heard the statement, only science can prove what's true? Yeah? That's logical positivism. That if it can't be proven scientifically, it's not true. Now, anybody who is a logician here understand what's wrong with that statement? That statement cannot be scientifically proven. So basically, it shoots itself in the foot. And A.J. Ayres, who was an English philosopher in the 20th century, who was one of these logical positivists, Os Guinness mentions a discussion he had with him, meeting him on a train, and he said that A.J. Ayres admitted it was the dumbest thing he'd ever said. And you'd have to take Os Guinness's view for that. These guys were, here's what they first came up as the Vienna Circle, and the computer's just moving a little slow. You'll see that you had to have handlebar mustaches to be part of their. Computer is just not being very positive right here.
Wasn't Hume's statement also a physical statement?
Yeah. It's self-defeating. It's a self-defeating statement. These were the first men in the Vienna Circle. And it is much more involved than what I'm giving you right now. But the Vienna Circle spread, and they didn't agree with each other. They couldn't all agree with themselves. But basically what they did was they declared that only facts derived from experiment, observation could be called truth, and they rejected all talk about values, ethics, morals, religion, philosophy, not only as preferences without foundation, but as meaningless or non-cognitive babble. So values then get depreciated as mere matters of taste, and as this is one of their quotes, and is not subject to rational or objective discussion. To ask whether it is wrong to lie or steal was equivalent to asking whether one prefers chocolate or vanilla ice cream. The answer was just a matter of personal taste, ungrounded in any truth or reality, because there was no experiment that could be performed to prove the truth of any answer. Now, anybody thinking ahead right here? What happens with this? What do people do with values? They can't be proven true or false. They can't be proven right or wrong. So you still have values, right? But nobody could tell you whether your value is right or wrong. And that's exactly what we saw on Washington State University. That people would just, because they weren't talking about science, even though biology is science, they were saying that here is where it is, gender is not biology. Gender has been relegated to the field, you ready, of psychology. So it's not science. Now it's just something you think in your mind. So gender is something you agree on with yourself, because nobody can tell you it's true or false, right or wrong. And this is where values happen. And this all happens in a world that is embraced in a postmodern mood. Remember what postmodernism is. This is where I got to express my art. I realized I could actually draw on my keynote presentation. So what does postmodernism mean? Postmodernism, foremost, is the destruction of truth, deconstruction of truth. So there is no objective truth because nobody can know reality as it is, and so truth is what you want it to be. Truth is what you decide it is. So something can be true for you, but not for me. And if you've heard anybody who's studied with Dr. Geisler, you know that, you ask them what? Is that true for just you, or is it true for everybody? And you've shown where all those truths are basically destroyed. But it is the deconstruction of truth, where truth has always been a philosophical concern, and it was always the fact that we understood we could know reality. Some people would argue whether you could know it as it is or as it appears to you, but they believe that you could know it. And this argument has been over and over for all years, and that correspondence theory of truth is really what is there. But postmodernism rejects the idea that you can know reality as it is. It rejects that idea that there are no fixed, universal, absolute truths. They're all in flux because nobody could know reality as it is. And that all truth is socially constructed. You can have your own truth. The second thing is the death of what we call the metanarrative. Metanarrative is the idea that there is one story that explains all of reality. Because if you deconstruct truth about reality, then there is no one thing that describes everything, not even evolution. Evolution is just the soft scientists, those are in history and psychology, they think these things don't exist. Obviously, the Bible is a metanarrative. It explains reality from God's perspective. But postmodernism has killed that. The demise of the text. This one really, I love this because basically it took the meaning of the text that you're reading away from the person who wrote it and put it into your hands. It's all about the interpreter rather than the author. Of course, people write books about this. And they write books telling you that the meaning of what I'm writing is really not in what I mean, but in what you're reading. Except I want you to understand it from my meaning and buy my book. And what gets me is that you pay for your child's education, or if you're a student who's paying you for your own tuition, to be told that you can't know anything. Just think about that. This is the kind of world we're living in. The dominion of therapy. And this is very subtle because this is a shift in authority, where the therapist has become the authority now. And it's taken away from the pastor, the priest, or anybody else. So in this realm, and what we see is a decline of authority, where we're seeing it. We're seeing it lived out in our world. So this is where the values part of it is really coming about, where we're challenging the police, we're challenging anybody in authority. If you were alive in the 60s, you remember when this was born, and now you're just watching it come into full maturity. It was given birth in the 60s, maybe a little earlier, but really it grew up through the 70s and 80s and 90s, and now we're seeing it really mature itself. Finally, the displacement of morality, where there is no absolute morality. And obviously, those students were talking about it, and we see this, that morals just don't exist. You make up your own morals. And this all came about through, I'll put David Hume up there again because he starts with the fact-value dichotomy. He separates it. But along a line, any teachers here, public school teachers? Yeah, please know that I really respect what you do. I mean, I honestly do. But I think you're in a system, I believe, this is my personal belief, that really works against everything that's in your heart to do.
I can verify that.
Okay. Good. Because I think you're on the front lines of, and we need to, again, this is free, no charge for this. I think we need to support our public school teachers and what they're doing, because I think if you don't have a calling to do what you're doing, I don't know why you're doing it, because it would be just the craziest thing to do. So David Hume, he gives us this fact-value dichotomy. This guy here, anybody can recognize, I know it's a cartoon figure of him. Yeah, this is Mr. Dewey. John Dewey, he basically gives us values clarification. You know what values clarification is? It was taught in the 70s, and I'm searching like crazy, because I love to do research, but I'm searching like crazy to try to find out where they dropped the term, because there was some legal issues with it. Values clarification, basically, I'll show you one form that helps students to decide. You see, because if there are no objective morals, and morals fall into the category of values, then no one can tell you what your morals ought to be. So here's what's taught, and this is why I say that we've educated our children to go and shoot other children, or to live in a crazy gender-free identity, because we've taught them that no one can impose their values on you. You have to decide for yourself what your values are. And in the 1970s, values clarification was just such a big thing that they were going to teach in children how to find out what their values were. Forget what your parents believe. Forget what your culture believes. You decide for yourself. Okay? And so we have this fact value. I have to just show you this. Okay. So science discovers the facts, and values, individuals determine their values. And that's John Dewey again. Give him this. Now, just look at this right here, right? Is that a fact or a value? Is the fact-value dichotomy a fact or a value? Can you prove it scientifically? I don't think so. So if it's not, can't be proven scientifically, it's what? It's a value. And it should be tossed in the flames, just like David Hume said. And yet people don't think critically enough to see this, that this is a self-defeating paradigm. And yet we live with it. So you're living with this basic lie. Because values can't be judged. Sorry, I went a little farther. Let me just go back here. Which to me, when I saw that, I thought, this is just the silliest thing ever. But it's having these obviously horrible, I keep on going through it, I'm sorry. It's having these horrible outcomes on us. And it's why we live in a culture of confusion. If anybody read Abdul Murray's book, Saving Truth, it is a must-read. I mean, it's just talks about this from a different perspective. Basically, I go through it again. Here they are. Here's how they taught you how to do it. This was one example. You can go online now and find forms because they still use it. Psychologists use it to help you find out what your values are. So here's what you have to do. Choose the value. Okay, say the value is gender. Let's just pick that. Here's it. So you choose the value, and then you look at it from the alternatives. So I look at gender, so what are my alternatives? Well, if you go on Facebook, or at least a couple of years ago, you have 50 different alternatives that you could choose from. Because they had, if you wanted to identify what your gender, when they asked you, they had 50 different choices that you could pick from. But say they're just two, just because I'm simple. And say there's just two, male and female, and you got to decide between one or the other. And then after considering which one you're going to choose, you have to consider the consequences of one or the other. So if I'm a male, what are the consequences? If I'm a biological male and I choose a gender as a male, then I consider what are the consequences of being that. Well, I could still be a homosexual, or I could just like women. But you're choosing the consequences. If you're a male, biological male, and you say, I want to be a female, I feel like a female, and consider the consequences. What does that mean? What's in your future? How's that going to work out for you if you go down that road? Okay. Number 4 was you had to decide to be happy with the choice. And that you had to publicly affirm it. This is if you're going to be a sound human being, then you had to come to the place where you would be happy with what your choice was, in other words, content with it, and then let everybody know that this is what I chose. This is what I am now. In other words, don't go in the closet. Stick with it outside. And then you had to act. You had to live it out. You had to live on the basis of your chosen value, whatever it is. So this is how they take you through values clarification. And then finally, you had to incorporate it into your own life. Yeah. Those are the things that you had to make sure you did. Okay, I want to move along here because I got about 10 minutes left. So here's our fact values again. And then I already, went ahead of myself. Told you the answer to this one. And then, remember, this is in this culture that we're living with this. Okay? I'm sorry. Again, went too fast for myself. If you would like these slides, I'll send you a PDF of them. I'll give you my email address at the end, and just email me that you'd like the slides. I'll send them to you. And again, if you go on YouTube, you can find that video and several other videos. But this is the culture that we're living in, again, just for a reminder's sake. I did this over two sessions when I taught it at my own seminar. This is one of the writers said there's a soft side. I think this was Abdu Murray. He said, or maybe it was Ravi Zachariah. He said there's a soft side to the meaning that suggests that objective facts are less influential in shaping public opinion than our appeals to emotion and personal belief. Well, that's hardly new. He said the hard meaning being smuggled in tells us that in this culture we willfully and justifiably convey something false because it accomplishes a personal or end goal. The end justifies the means, and the means, in effect, do not need to justify themselves. That's what's happening in our culture. And if you remember just the last couple of weeks, you could see that played out in the choice of a Supreme Court justice. Not making a political statement. You just think about everything that went on there and just see what it was. Okay. Now here's a little bit of my artwork again. I say this all the time when I teach this. When you choose, or when you lose rather, absolute truth, you lose any hope for a moral society. Because autonomy replaces freedom. And autonomy is different than freedom in that we are not free to do whatever we want. We are free to choose a moral choice. Autonomy is I don't want to be responsible to anybody. Because when we choose morality, we look for where does that morality come from? Where we say in apologetics, if there's a moral law, there's a lawgiver. And we are responsible to that lawgiver. J. Warner Wallace was talking about that this morning, about if there's a moral lawgiver in the universe, we got to be responsible to it. Okay. How do we navigate this? How do we get through this whole idea? Because the person who is living in a gender fluid or gender free life, if I could say it that way, is really someone who's not responsible to anybody. They're responsible to themselves. That's basically what we're saying. Rather, true freedom. Jesus said, what? He said, if you make your home in my word, then truly you're my disciples, and you shall know the truth, and the truth will set you free. But there he's saying, he's giving you conditions for being knowing the truth as being his disciple. It's remaining or making your home in his word. Okay, so here's one of the things, again, probably hard to write out, but in the search for truth, feelings such as desire to feel nice, desire to feel comfortable, desire to be affirmed, desire to be included, desire to feel warm and cozy, desire to be wealthy and powerful, etc., all must take a back seat to reasonable decision-making based on something recognized as authoritative that is believed to be true, meaning consistent with what is actually real and is the case. So that's the first thing that we have to do. I think we become victims of this society when we give into it. But we are choosing to be victims when we do that. And as a church, you've got to stand up for truth. You've got to stand up for truth as it is. Ravi did say this one. He said, truth is stated in propositions where words describe reality as it is. I love the way that says that. The truth is stated in propositions where words describe reality as it is. And that's what we've got to see, is that we've got to be lovers of truth. And that's the question. Do you love the truth? This is my version of Aristotle's quote of truth. He says, to say what is, that it is, and to say what is not, that it is not. That's his way of saying it. Just real simple. Tell it like it is. John said this in his gospel. He said, for the law was given through Moses, grace and truth were realized through Jesus Christ. I underline that word realize. Came into being, came into existence in that. Now this is one I preach on almost regularly, that the church is the pillar and support of the truth. 1 Timothy 3:15. Now do we act, or have we acted, please, this is not personal, has the church acted like it's the pillar and support of truth? Even if we take it as the gospel. See, I think I was put here to defend the gospel. I think that's my job, to preach and to defend the gospel. I think the church is supposed to be the pillar and support of the gospel. Yeah? It's not going to come from anywhere else. And nobody else is really going to support absolute truth. If you're looking for someone else to support absolute truth, it's just not going to happen. Now, it's easy to say the church should do it. Here's the question. Who's the church? Yeah. And we can say we are, but we should also say I am. Right? When I say I am, I become the person who's responsible for it. Okay. Do you love the truth? See? And I think that's part of it. You have to have a love for the truth. And truth is always the first casualty. That's what's always attacked. Absolute truth is always attacked. And it's some skewing of reality, some skewing of the way things are. And then it just becomes blatant enough. You know, the Nazis said that if you repeat the truth, the lie long enough, people will believe it. And that's what we're seeing. We're living in that kind of world right now. And the church basically sits idly by and lets it happen. Drives me nuts. We should be flooding the op-ed pieces of newspapers every time somebody tries to state a lie or perpetrate a lie. We ought to be just flooding it as Christians. We ought to be doing those things. Remember this? This is what autonomy looks like. This is what it really looks like. When autonomy has its way, this is what it looks like. Okay, all this is happening while we're supposed to be preaching the gospel to this postmodern, post-truth culture. I'm running here. I'm going to give you a little time for Q&A. We have, I think, is it 5 or 10 minutes afterwards? I don't know how much we'll get into it. But this is all happening. And I get passionate about this because I think, this is how I preach the gospel. Jesus wants everything from you. He wants everything from you. That's what he asked me for. Yeah. The good news is I have everything to give him. Right? Even though he wants everything from me, you think, well, that's a lot. Well, you have everything to give him. And that's what he wants from us. And we need to see ourselves in the midst of this chaos. We are the light that really shines on reality. And truth is the central thing. If we looked at a battle plan, we could do that. If we were in a church, maybe I'd give you a battle plan that I would think this would work in our culture, in our society. But you've got to start with your love for the truth. And do you love it enough to stand for it? Would you nail your flag to that? This is where I stand. That we are going to stand for absolute truth. He's the God of truth. We have the gospel of truth. We're the pillar and support of truth. We ought to be there. Okay, here's my information. I'll leave that up there. But any questions or comments or... Hey, thanks for listening to this teaching or watching this teaching as a video. If you'd like to know more about the how-tos of navigating a post-truth culture, sign up to our newsletter. I'll be covering more of these things in posts that will appear on our website as well as in our newsletters. We'll make announcements for it. If you go to our website, that's at nopadanswers.com. You can sign up for our newsletter. And I would ask also that you pray about becoming a donor for us. Help us to continue to minister and do the things we're doing here in the Northeast and around the world. I failed to mention during my talk that I'm actively involved in South Africa, helping a Bible college there with about 60 or 70 students, and helping to shape and form them to be minister the gospel in a nation that is really at the crossroads. And your support will definitely help do what I'm doing there. Again, if you visit our website, sign up for our newsletter, you can find out more about what is happening there. Thanks again for watching. This is Ray Ciervo. I hope that we see you again sometime. Thank you.